They say if you stay quiet and work hard, you will get what you deserve. But what they do not say is that sometimes what you deserve is stolen by someone who talks louder, lies smoother, and climbs over your back on the way up. My name is Jenna Morales. I am 38 years old, born and raised in San Antonio, Texas. I built my career in Dallas. I am a senior strategist, anyway, at a firm called Sterling West Strategies. Or as I used to call it, the place I gave 11 years of my life to. I was there before the rebrand, before the glass conference rooms and the marble-floored lobby, back when it was 3 partners and a WeWork space with duct-tape chairs. I helped that company land its first major accounts. I trained interns who became department heads. I gave up vacations, weekends, even sleep because I believed in the mission. I was not just an employee. I was part of its DNA. And then came Chad Rennicks, 34. Loud, sharp suits and not half as clever as he thought he was. They brought him in as the new visionary director, fresh off some viral marketing campaign for a deodorant brand. Within 2 weeks, he was making changes. New slogans, new meeting structures. He called it evolution. I called it erasure. He looked at everything I had built and labeled it legacy thinking, as if the foundation I had poured was now a liability to his empire of buzzwords. At first, it was subtle. I noticed I was left off calendar invites for strategy calls with major clients, the very ones I had brought in. Decks I had authored came back with my name removed and a junior's face slapped on top of my slides. Campaign decisions were made without consulting me, even when they directly contradicted the data we had spent months gathering. I would sit in the weekly staff meetings and listen to Chad praise 20-something assistants for ideas I had already pitched a year earlier. Ideas he had once called too safe, but now repackaged as bold innovation. I wish I could say I was just being paranoid, that maybe I was too protective or resistant to change, but the pattern became impossible to ignore. My team began to look at me with uncertainty, like they were waiting for the moment I would be escorted out. I could hear them choosing sides in real time. When I spoke, the room got quiet, but when Chad cracked a joke or threw out some trendy term like brand elasticity, everyone nodded like he was Steve Jobs reincarnated. I started getting feedback that my tone in emails needed softening, that I should adapt to the cultural shift we were undergoing. Chad even pulled me aside once and said, "You are brilliant, Jenna, but you do not scale." That was the moment I knew. He was not just changing the system, he was pushing me out. Slowly, methodically, with that arrogant smile of his, he was dismantling everything I had built and replacing it with smoke and mirrors. And worse, he was convincing everyone around me that this was the future, that he was the future. I am not someone who cries in bathrooms or rants in meetings, but inside, I was seething. This was not just career sabotage. It felt personal. I had given my best years to that company. Missed birthdays, rescheduled holidays, stayed up at 2 a.m. cleaning up client messes so our reputation would not suffer. I had mentored Chad's precious junior team before he even knew how to read a profit forecast, and now I was being treated like an outdated PDF. Still, I stayed calm. I played along. I smiled in meetings, nodded at his nonsense, and watched quietly as he carved a space for himself, using pieces of my past work. I knew if I pushed back too hard, he would call it resistance. If I stayed silent, I could at least observe, gather, prepare, because deep down I was not going to let this man write the end of my story. No, he might have had the spotlight now, but I knew how the game worked, and I had been playing it far longer than he realized. It happened on a Friday. Of course it did. Anyone who has ever worked in corporate knows what a Friday afternoon meeting means, especially when it appears on your calendar without warning. Mine was set for 4:30 p.m., end of day, end of week. HR was dialed in over Zoom, and Chad was already in the conference room when I arrived, sitting comfortably like he had been rehearsing this scene for weeks. He greeted me with a smile that made my skin crawl. That fake, smug smile people wear when they know they are about to pull something and want to act like it is for your own good. I sat down. The HR rep introduced herself like we had not met 3 times before. Chad got right to it. "Jenna," he said, "this is not a performance conversation. We just believe the company is moving into a new phase, and we are seeking fresh energy and cultural alignment moving forward." That was it. No metrics, no complaints, no specific incident cited. Just some vague phrases pulled from a leadership workshop and wrapped around a loaded decision. They wanted me gone. Not because I had failed, but because I no longer fit their new image. I looked at Chad, and I swear the man could not even hold my eye for more than 5 seconds. He had already moved on. In his mind, I was a relic of the past, a piece of the company's early story that had served its purpose, but now needed to be cleared away for whatever shiny vision he was chasing. It was not even personal to him. That made it worse. To him, I was just a line item he had finally crossed off his agenda. I did not argue. I did not cry. I did not ask for a second chance. I listened to their nonsense about respecting my legacy and honoring my contributions and kept my expression calm. I knew that no one in that room had the guts to admit what was really going on. They were erasing the people who had made the company strong because they were too proud to admit the new leadership was not working. I was being pushed out because I reminded everyone of how things used to work, when competence still mattered more than flash. They offered me a severance package. HR read off the terms while Chad sat back like a king who had done his royal duty. I signed what I needed to sign, picked up the thin envelope with the exit documents, and walked out. No final meeting with the team, no goodbye drinks, just silence, a locked jaw, and my heels echoing across the polished tile as I walked past the front desk one last time. I made it all the way to the elevator before I let my hand tremble. The anger did not hit me all at once, it came in waves. That night, I sat in my living room, still dressed in the same clothes, staring at the wall and replaying every scene from the last 3 months, every time Chad dismissed my input, every meeting I was excluded from, every client concern that was redirected without my knowledge. I had not just been fired, I had been dismantled, slowly, quietly, like they were disarming a threat without setting off alarms. But what they did not realize was that while they were cutting me out, I had been watching, recording, remembering. Let them think I was crushed. Let them believe they had won. That was their last mistake. I had spent 11 years building something real, relationships, trust, results, and I was not about to walk away empty-handed. I knew who the clients trusted. I knew who the staff came to for real answers, and I knew deep down that Sterling West was already starting to rot from the inside. I would not make a scene. I would not post some bitter message online. I would play the long game, the one they thought I was too outdated to understand, because if they wanted a new era, then fine. I would give them one, just not the one they were expecting. I had not spent over a decade in strategy without learning how to play long games. People like Chad think everything is short-term, flashy numbers, loud wins, big exits, but strategy is never about noise. It is about leverage, timing, position. And I had been quietly setting mine up for months, long before that Friday meeting ever appeared on my calendar. Every time I led a campaign or pitched a new idea, I backed up the decks to my personal cloud. Not confidential company data, not anything under lock and key, just the things I had created myself. Client-facing presentations, my own frameworks, pitch slides with my initials in the corner. Things that clearly bore my fingerprints. Every testimonial a client ever sent me, I saved. Every thank you email. Every Slack thread where a junior team member told me I helped them understand strategy for the first time. These were not weapons. These were reminders. Proof that for years I had been the one they relied on, and that when I disappeared, they would feel it. I was never planning revenge. Not in the traditional sense. I did not want to hurt the company. I wanted to remind it and its clients what it had lost. My value was not tied to a title. It was tied to results, and I had more than a decade's worth of receipts. I had proof that I had not just shown up. I had shaped what Sterling West became. Quietly, professionally, and consistently. But I also documented the other things. Not out of spite, but because I had a gut feeling things were going to unravel. Chad had a habit of skipping processes he found inefficient, like performance reviews, budget reviews, even project retrospectives. He hated documentation, said it slowed innovation. What it actually did was hide mistakes, like the time he doubled a client's ad spend without notifying accounting, or when he approved a campaign that was flagged by legal, then blamed it on a junior associate. I kept my own notes, screenshots, timelines. I tracked how decisions were made, who was consulted, and who got thrown under the bus when things went wrong. None of this was illegal. I was not hacking into anything. I was just paying attention. And when you work in strategy long enough, you learn to think 5 moves ahead. I knew if things continued down Chad's path, clients were going to notice. And when they did, I wanted to be able to show them where the fork in the road really began. I did not want to convince anyone. I just wanted the truth to speak for itself. I also looked back at emails. Dozens of threads where Chad had ignored my recommendations, only to circle back months later acting like he came up with them himself. I found messages where he openly dismissed client concerns because he thought they were too sensitive or not brand forward. These were the kinds of red flags you only see if you are close enough to feel the heat, but far enough to step away before the explosion. I downloaded copies of my calendar, my speaking engagements, conference invites, all the times I had represented Sterling West on panels, webinars, and client retreats. I made a private folder labeled Credibility, because I knew once I walked out, they would try to rewrite history, pretend I had been background noise, but I had the record, and it was clean, sharp, unshakable. People underestimate quiet professionals. We are the ones who make the engine run, but we are never the ones shouting from the rooftops. I let the extroverts take credit while I focused on the outcome. But now I was building something for myself, and I needed that foundation to be solid, undeniable, and loud enough to carry without me raising my voice. I was not looking for pity. I was preparing for truth. And if anyone came knocking wondering what had gone wrong at Sterling West, I would not need to say much. The digital footprint would do the talking for me. I gave myself 2 weeks, not out of luxury, but out of necessity. I needed the space to breathe, to reset, to let the sting of betrayal settle into something usable. I did not want to act out of bitterness. I wanted to move from clarity. So I turned off my phone, spent long mornings at my favorite coffee shop in Del Mar Heights, and let my mind rest from the constant tension I had lived under for the last year. But I am not the kind of woman who sits still for long. By day 15, I was already drafting paperwork for my own LLC, Horizon Edge Consulting. The name felt like air, clean, focused, forward-looking. Everything Sterling West had stopped being the moment it chose style over substance. The very next morning, I sent a carefully written email to Ellie Drayton, the CEO of Miratech Global. She and I had worked closely for over 18 months. Miratech had been one of my most complex accounts. Tight regulations, fast-moving tech, and boardroom politics that would scare most strategists off. But I thrived in it. Ellie had always appreciated how I made complicated things simple. We built trust over time, and even though she had kept things professional after I left, I had a hunch she had been less than thrilled with how things were going since Chad took over my role. I kept the email simple, a short note checking in, letting her know I had launched something new. No pitch, no pressure, just an open door in case she was looking for better alignment. While I waited, I started reaching out to others who had been slowly cut out like I had. There were more than I remembered. Jason, our former analytics lead, had been quietly let go after Chad decided dashboards were too granular. Maya, a copy director with 10 years of experience, had resigned when Chad rewrote her campaign without ever speaking to her. I reconnected with Logan, one of our old media buyers, who had walked away after watching budgets get burned on vanity placements just to impress one loud client. These were not bitter employees. They were seasoned professionals, talented people who still cared about doing real work. Together, we started putting the pieces together, not out of vengeance, but out of curiosity. We asked ourselves what was missing at Sterling now. The answer came quickly: leadership that understood the work. Not the branding, not the stage talk, but the actual day-to-day mechanics of building trust, delivering outcomes, and making clients feel seen. Sterling had lost its core, and what we had collectively was not just knowledge. It was a system, a rhythm, a proven way to move results without chaos. I did not need to rebuild Sterling, I needed to build the opposite of it. I had never seen myself as a founder before. I always thought I would climb the ladder, stay loyal, and maybe one day be asked to sit at the table. But once you see how fragile those tables are, how easily they flip when egos walk in, you stop waiting for a seat. You build your own. I started sketching out what Horizon Edge could be, not a copy of a corporate agency, something smaller, smarter, focused on clarity, relationship, and meaningful work. No bloated departments, no flashy jargon, just a lean team of people who knew how to get results. I built a site. I opened a business account. I worked with a designer I trusted to create a brand that felt modern but grounded. I called in favors, bartered when I had to, and kept costs low. I even hired a part-time assistant I had worked with years ago, someone who knew how I liked to move and who kept things running without me having to micromanage. When Ellie's reply finally came, it was short. She said, "Funny timing, I was just about to reach out to you." That was all I needed, not a promise, just a crack in the door. Enough to know that people remembered where the real value had come from. Horizon Edge was not just a company. It was the quiet rebuild of everything I had been pushed out of. Only this time, I was in control. When Ellie called, she did not waste time with small talk. Her tone was direct but familiar, like someone who had been waiting for a window to open. She said, "Jenna, I noticed the drop the week you left. It was immediate." Her voice was calm but heavy, like she had been carrying the weight of something for a while. She went on to tell me the transition at Sterling West had been a disaster. Strategy meetings were being pushed without explanation. Her internal team was missing key deliverables, and the new account rep? She described him as eager but totally unseasoned. Worse, she said, the invoices had doubled, with half the value missing. Then she said something I will never forget. "You were the reason we stayed with Sterling for so long." It was not flattery. It was a matter-of-fact statement. One professional woman looking another in the eye, even over the phone, and telling the truth. I sat with that sentence after we hung up, not because I was surprised, but because it confirmed everything I had quietly believed for months. My work had held more weight than the company ever acknowledged, and the clients knew it. 2 weeks later, Ellie and her COO, Jordan Kim, flew to Dallas. We met in a quiet coffee shop near the downtown arts district. No suits, no boardroom, just real talk across a small table with 3 coffees between us. Ellie came prepared. She had a list of concerns. Jordan had spreadsheets, I had a proposal. We laid it all out honestly, what went wrong, what was missing, and what needed to change. There was no ego in the room, just 3 professionals who knew bad leadership when they saw it and wanted better. They asked me if Horizon Edge was ready to take on something as large as Miratech's global account. I was honest. "We're lean, but we're not green," I said, "and the team I'm building knows how to execute without chaos." They asked about timelines, confidentiality, transition planning. I answered every question with calm precision. This was not my first time managing a portfolio of that scale. The only difference was this time I would be doing it without someone above me cutting corners or changing the rules mid-game. By the time we left that coffee shop, we had a handshake agreement. 1 month of transition, a soft move, legal, clean, and airtight. Then, by day 31, the entire $80 million Miratech account would transfer to Horizon Edge Consulting. No noise, no announcement, just a quiet pivot of trust. Ellie said she would notify Sterling West personally. Jordan would work with my operations lead to handle logistics. I walked to my car with my heart pounding and my palms warm. Not out of nerves, out of clarity. This was it. This was the moment the work spoke louder than the name behind it. I had spent 11 years trying to earn respect inside someone else's system. And in under 3 months, I had rebuilt something that was already trusted more than the legacy brand I left behind. This was not revenge. This was recognition, of consistency, of leadership, of showing up when it counted. And the best part? I had done it quietly, no lawsuits, no public callouts, just results. When I told my small but mighty team what had just happened, we sat in silence for a moment. Then Maya, my head of content, grinned and said, "Guess it's real now." And it was. We were not a startup anymore. We were a player, and we were about to carry an $80 million account because someone finally said what I had always suspected. You were the reason we stayed. While I was quietly building something stable and real, Sterling West was crumbling from the inside out. They had thrown a ton of money into a full-scale rebrand, slick new logo, trendy color palette, and a tagline that sounded like it came straight from a tech conference keynote. But none of that glitter covered the cracks. The truth was leaking out, and fast. Clients were confused, projects were late, deliverables went missing. What had once been a well-oiled machine was now a tangle of unread emails, missed calls, and broken trust. I started getting texts from people still inside. Former teammates, interns, and even vendors began reaching out to me. Not to gossip, but to vent. They were trying to make sense of the chaos. Some of them sent screenshots from internal Slack threads that made my stomach turn. One showed a junior strategist begging for direction on a multi-million-dollar campaign that had no lead assigned. Another showed a client's complaint thread that went unanswered for 4 days because nobody knew who was responsible. One thread even had a confused finance associate asking why invoices were being rejected by clients who had never even received their original statements. It was like watching a ship spring leaks from every angle. I saw names in those threads I remembered well. Hardworking people who used to be sharp, confident, and respected. Now they were frustrated, anxious, and unsure if they would even have a job in a few months. One of them, Jason, messaged me late one night and wrote, "We are drowning over here. I don't know how much longer I can fake it." That hit me, because Jason was one of the most even-tempered, steady professionals I had ever worked with. If he was reaching that point, it was not just mismanagement, it was full-scale failure. What made it worse was how completely out of touch Chad Rennick seemed to be. While the floor burned beneath him, he was on LinkedIn posting about disruption and vision. He did podcast interviews talking about building a modern agency culture and unlocking next-gen talent while his actual team was left flailing with no real guidance. From the outside, it looked like he was leading a revolution. From the inside, it looked like he was setting fire to everything that had kept Sterling West stable for over a decade. He was not fixing the system. He was gutting it. I kept my distance. I did not engage with the drama. I did not reply to anyone asking if I had predicted this. But I watched, carefully, quietly, because the signs were undeniable. More and more clients started shopping around. I knew this because my inbox started filling up with inquiries. Brands I had once worked with under the Sterling umbrella, now reaching out to see what Horizon Edge was offering. Some were cautious, some were blunt, but all of them said the same thing in one way or another. It is not the same without you. Sterling's client loss was not a landslide. Not yet, but the cracks were visible and growing wider by the week. Chad had focused so much energy on performance optics that he never stopped to notice that performance itself had fallen apart. He had removed the glue without replacing it, and now the tower was swaying. There was something oddly poetic about it. I did not have to sabotage anything. I did not have to smear his name. All I had to do was build something better, in plain sight. And as each month passed, it became clearer. The loyalty had never belonged to the agency. It had belonged to the people inside it who actually delivered. People like me. And now those people were gone. Sterling West had become a shell with glass walls, shiny on the surface, hollow at the core, and anyone paying close enough attention could already see the first signs of collapse. It happened on a Tuesday morning, right as I was finishing my second cup of coffee and reviewing timelines for a new onboarding sequence. My phone lit up with a LinkedIn notification, then another, then 6 more. I opened the app, and there it was. Ellie Drayton had gone public. She had posted a clean, sharp announcement on her profile. Excited to partner with Horizon Edge Consulting, led by Jenna Morales, whose work speaks louder than buzzwords. No fluff, no dramatic call-out, just a direct nod to quality, consistency, and trust. I stared at the screen for a moment, letting it sink in, because that post meant everything. It meant we were real, visible, a force. And most importantly, it meant Sterling West had officially lost Miratech's $80 million account. The post was already gathering reactions by the dozens. Comments flooded in from executives I recognized, consultants I had crossed paths with over the years, and even a few former interns who had once shadowed me in pitch meetings. Everyone was noticing, and people were talking. Within the hour, my inbox was a mess, in the best possible way. 3 former clients I had managed while at Sterling reached out. One wrote, "So glad to see you're back doing what you do best. Can we talk?" Another said, "Honestly, we've been waiting for something like this." These were brands I had helped grow from mid-tier to market leaders. They remembered who guided the strategy, who showed up to solve crises, and who never overpromised just to make noise. And now they wanted that again, on my terms. The most surprising message came from a partner firm we had collaborated with 3 years earlier, someone I had not heard from in ages. Their VP of marketing simply wrote, "Jenna, tell me what you're offering. We're ready to move." That was the moment I realized this was not just about the clients I had known. Word had spread beyond the usual circles. People were watching the shift unfold, and they were not waiting to see if we were legitimate. They already believed we were. What Sterling West failed to understand was that clients do not stay because of flashy decks or glossy branding. They stay because of trust, results, relationships built over time. And that trust had walked out the door when they let me go. I had never made a scene. I had never fired back publicly. But now, without saying a single word, the response was louder than anything I could have scripted. Ellie's post was the first domino, and it toppled with force. I heard later that Chad did not even realize what had happened until someone from the executive team forwarded him Ellie's announcement. Apparently, he dismissed it as client churn at first, saying it was natural. But by the end of that week, the internal mood had shifted. A senior analyst leaked to me that Chad had called an emergency meeting and told his team, "Do not engage with Jenna Morales. She's irrelevant," which honestly told me everything I needed to know. If I was truly irrelevant, he would not be talking about me at all. What they never saw coming was that I had not taken anything from them. I had simply rebuilt what they carelessly threw away. Sterling was losing because they had abandoned the very thing that made them valuable, the people who carried their reputation on their backs. I just picked up what they dropped. By Friday, my small office felt like a war room in a good way. New contracts were being drafted, video calls were lining up. My team was buzzing. We were running lean, but we were strong. And the best part? We were just getting started. The public shift was not about revenge. It was about alignment, about clients choosing clarity over chaos. It was proof that doing the work, quietly and consistently, still mattered. That expertise still mattered. That I still mattered. And Sterling West? They had no clue how deep the wave would go. I was not surprised when I saw his name pop up on my phone. What surprised me was the timing. It was just after 7 p.m. on a Wednesday, and I was finishing up a final contract review for a new client. The name on the screen read Scott Marin. That name used to mean something to me. Scott was one of the founding partners of Sterling West. Back in the early days, he was respected, measured, pragmatic, sharp. He was not the type to get involved in office drama or parade around like he was the smartest guy in the room. He had been one of the few people who at one point genuinely supported my rise at the company. But clearly, that version of him no longer existed. I let it go to voicemail. Then an hour later, I got the follow-up email. Subject line, private discussion proposal. I opened it out of curiosity more than anything else. He wrote that he had been following recent developments, how impressed he was by Horizon Edge's traction, how proud he was of what I had built. Then came the pitch. He wanted to explore a white label partnership deal. Sterling, according to him, had more clients than their current team could service effectively. They were looking for a strategic outlet to handle select accounts under my brand, while they maintained the client relationships at a high level. He framed it as a win-win. It would save face, as he put it, for them, for me, for the entire situation. I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen. It took me a minute to even process the irony. Just 6 months ago, I was shoved out under the pretense of not aligning with the company's new energy. Now they were asking me to come back, quietly, unofficially, and without public recognition, to clean up the very mess they had created. They were not looking for a partner. They were looking for a patch. Someone to preserve the illusion that Sterling West was still functioning, still capable, still in control. But I had no interest in being a crutch for a crumbling house. I called Scott the next morning. I wanted him to hear the answer directly from me. No ambiguity, no email diplomacy, just truth. He picked up right away, and after the initial small talk, he jumped into it. "We think this could be mutually beneficial," he said. "We would retain key client trust. You would expand your footprint without the pressure of direct acquisition." I let him finish, then responded calmly. "Scott, I appreciate you reaching out, but I did not build Horizon Edge to be a Band-Aid for someone else's infection." There was a pause. I could almost hear him recalibrating. "We are not asking you to compromise your brand," he said. "We are simply trying to maintain continuity." "No," I said, firmer now. "You are trying to avoid consequences. That is not the same thing." Another pause. He thanked me for my time. I thanked him for the offer. We both knew what had just happened. He was not going to call again, and I was not going to look back. What Scott and Sterling West failed to understand was that I had nothing left to prove to them. The clients had made their decision. The market had made its decision. And so had I. I had built something that was clean, independent, and rooted in values I believed in. Partnering with them, even quietly, would have been a betrayal of everything I had fought for. After the call, I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee and walked into our small shared office space where my team was working late on a new pitch deck. I looked around at them, former analysts, creatives, and leads who had been written off just like I had. Now they were thriving. We were thriving. There was no part of me that wanted to reattach myself to a broken machine that was still running on ego and denial. I sat down, opened a blank document, and titled it, Next Phase Planning. That was where my energy belonged now. Not in rehashing old battles, but in building something stronger, cleaner, and smarter than anything we had left behind. Sterling could try to pivot, rebrand, or outsource all they wanted, but they could not buy back integrity. They had already sold that off the day they let the right people walk out the door. Signing the lease felt like signing a new chapter of my life. It was not some grand ribbon-cutting ceremony or press-worthy headline. It was a Tuesday afternoon in downtown Dallas, the kind of day where the sky was overcast, but the air felt still. I held the pen in my hand and signed my name at the bottom of the lease agreement for a modest office suite on the 6th floor of a building that overlooked a quiet street just off Main. It was not flashy, it was not fancy, but it was mine. And more importantly, it was real. There was no champagne, no glossy announcements, just the sound of my laptop booting up, the hiss of a fresh pot of coffee brewing in the corner, and the rustling of tangled extension cords as we pieced together our desks and monitors. We were not trying to impress anyone. We were trying to build something that would last, something honest. I brought on 5 people, every single one of them someone I had worked with before, people I had seen perform under pressure, people who had been overlooked, underestimated, or squeezed out by politics. I did not need stars. I needed grown-ups who knew how to show up and deliver. Horizon Edge Consulting was not built on buzzwords or artificial hype. It was built on doing the work. Quietly, consistently, and with full attention. We did not want to be the biggest agency on paper. We wanted to be the most trusted in the room. When we pitched clients, we told them the truth. We were not going to wow them with overpriced decks or fake urgency. We would listen. We would respond. We would fix what was broken and build what was missing. It turned out, people were starving for that kind of approach. Our first 3 clients came by word of mouth. 2 from my old network and 1 through Ellie at Miratech, who vouched for us without hesitation. From there, things moved fast, not because we chased volume, but because we delivered value. Every deadline was met. Every problem was addressed directly. No ghosting, no hiding, just work. Honest, clean work. I refused to run Horizon Edge like a performance. We were not a stage. We were a partner. Clients were not treated like leads on a spreadsheet. They were names, faces, challenges, goals. We listened to what they actually needed instead of pushing them into a one-size-fits-all model. That small decision changed everything. Clients stayed, they referred others, they trusted us. And when they spoke about us on calls or in meetings, it was not just about deliverables. It was about relief, reliability, respect. By the end of Q2, we had exceeded projections I had quietly set for our first full year. Horizon Edge was managing $120 million in active accounts. Most of that had been pulled from agencies that had stopped listening, agencies that thought they were too big to fail, too modern to adjust. Our edge was not some proprietary algorithm or rebrand gimmick. It was empathy, precision, and execution. And people noticed. There were still hard days. There were nights I stayed late with my team, triple-checking decks, fixing last-minute requests, and dealing with the unpredictable chaos that comes with growing a new business. But even in the fatigue, I felt something different. It was not resentment. It was not burnout. It was pride, the kind of pride that only comes from building something with your own hands and knowing it stands on solid ground. One Friday night around 10:30 p.m., I sat alone in the office. Everyone else had gone home. I looked out the window at the street below, quiet, calm, the hum of a city that never stops moving. I thought about all the years I spent pouring myself into someone else's machine, the sleepless nights, the extra hours, the ignored suggestions, the office politics. All of it had led me here, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. We were still small, still scrappy, still figuring out systems and workflows, but we were real. No more pretending, no more faking alignment, just purpose, built one honest decision at a time. And that to me felt more powerful than anything I had left behind. Sterling West collapsed faster than anyone expected. It started slowly, first with quiet murmurs on LinkedIn, then confirmed by a few mutual contacts. Within 1 quarter, 6 of their major clients had walked away. Not just small accounts either. These were long-standing partnerships, the kind that held entire teams afloat. One by one, those clients either found new homes or came knocking on Horizon Edge's door. The rumors were no longer rumors, they were facts. Sterling West was bleeding out, and there was no one left with a tourniquet. Then came the audit. Word spread that an internal review had uncovered misallocated budgets, missing expense reports, and inflated project billing. The culture that Chad had curated, flashy, fast, and performative, was the very thing that broke them. Junior staff were burned out, senior talent had vanished, and the new hires had no mentorship to guide them. When the audit report landed on the desks of Sterling's remaining partners, Chad Rennicks resigned within 48 hours. No farewell post, no legacy speech, just a quiet exit, cloaked in PR language about pursuing new opportunities. I never gloated, not once. I did not post about it. I did not retweet the gossip. I did not even mention the name Sterling West aloud unless someone else brought it up first. My energy was not there anymore. It was in my team, my clients, my work. Letting go of that bitterness had been one of the best decisions I ever made. Watching them fall was not the goal. Building something better had always been the point. Still, there were moments that felt like poetic justice, like the day I passed their old building, the one with the floor-to-ceiling glass windows and the Sterling West logo in etched silver across the main lobby doors. It was empty now. Office lights off, lobby stripped of all branding. A for lease sign placed crookedly in the front window, half-taped and weather-worn. I was on my way to meet a new client just 2 blocks down, a referral from one of the clients Sterling had lost. I stopped at the crosswalk, looked up at the building. 11 years of my life had been spent behind those windows. So many nights, so many deadlines, so many weekends I had sacrificed to make that company better. I did not feel angry anymore. I felt free. That building used to make my stomach turn. Now it meant nothing. Just another empty shell in a city that rewards forward motion. At lunch, the client asked me what had happened with Sterling. I kept it simple. I left, they changed, clients noticed. She nodded like she had heard it all before, because she had. In our world, reputation is built one decision at a time, and lost the same way. By the end of that quarter, Horizon Edge had onboarded 4 new accounts, each one representing the kind of client I used to dream of working with. Collaborative, transparent, long-term focused. We were not chasing numbers. We were choosing people. And that made every project feel personal in the best way. Someone once told me that revenge is a dish best served cold, but I disagree. Success is not revenge. It is redemption. It is reclaiming your worth, your voice, and your future. Gloating never built a legacy, but resilience, integrity, leadership that listens and delivers, that is the stuff people remember. That is the work that outlives us. So no, I did not celebrate Sterling's collapse. I did not need to. Their downfall was just a mirror showing what happens when ego runs louder than ethics. And me? I was too busy helping clients do the exact opposite. Now when I walk into my office, coffee in hand, team buzzing with ideas, calendar full of purpose, I do not think about the ones who underestimated me. I think about the ones who believed in what I could build. And as far as legacy goes, that is all I ever really wanted.